He's Howard Eibach, a former copywriter and creative director and the author of 2 books on the creative brief.
And he's Henry Gomez, an ad agency strategist with over 27 years of experience. Together, he and I are the Brief Brothers. We love talking about creative briefs, briefing, and advertising. We are back, Henry, and it's good to see you back from your whoever you went hanging out with, Bill Murray. I don't know what that was all about, but it was good to have you back.
I was unavoidably detained. Sorry.
Unavoidably detained. And if you missed our last episode, that little inside joke means nothing to you. So you got to go back and watch the episodes. We are following up after a 2-parter with our new friend, Sarah Walker Hall. She's the author of a creative brief that I've been raving about for many, many years that she wrote for Kiwi Shoe Polish. Sarah is a senior strategist with TRG, formerly the Richards Group. The first episode we met her. The second episode we dived in deep into the brief itself. Today, you and I are going to look at this brief for Kiwi, all 127 words, and talk about it from our perspective. We heard about it from hers before. Now you and I are going to do an examination. It is, I think, an amazing brief. We agree that there's no such thing as a perfect brief. This one's darn close. Let's take a look.
Yep. So it's a good thing, I think, now in retrospect that I missed the episodes with her, because I'm looking at this fresh.
Yeah.
And I can give, my unadulterated gut reaction.
That's good. Now, it's what, 6, 7 questions, but a little bit of background in case you missed the previous episodes. TRG, formerly the Richards Group, had pitched this business, the Kiwi shoe polish business, and just won it. So this was among the first couple of projects that they did, and it might have been the first. And the other reminder is, this is the one that I find so hard to believe, Sarah had recently switched from brand management to account planning, and she'd worked on a bunch of different accounts, but this was her first creative brief as a professional. She had never written one before. But this one that we're looking at here is actually not her first draft. It's a number of drafts later that she actually rewrote it from scratch. She tossed her original draft and started over after she had done some personal field work. She grabbed her camera, went out to a local mall, and was asking guys to let her take pictures of their shoes as she was trying to figure out how to go about this brief. And their interaction with her at that experience, at that field research, changed her entire thinking about this brief. She tossed this the original draft out and rewrote this draft. I think she devoted about 8 to 10 hours to doing this draft. And this is now the draft that became the basis for the campaign. The campaign itself was an award-winning campaign. And this brief, part of a case study, got an honorable mention or a second place in another award show. So this brief and the campaign itself has a lot of history. Sarah said that the work for the campaign is still displayed on the walls at their office 20 years later. So there's a lot of pride that goes into this. My first reaction, the thing I like first, let me just start by saying the part of this brief I love probably the most is actually part of the template. It's on every brief, and I think they're still using this. They might have changed it a little bit, but they're still using it. It's this part here. I'm going to kind of highlight it. This is the template. People don't like ads. People don't trust ads. People don't remember ads. What will make this one different? This is like a taunt to the brief writer. This is a little 2x4 over the head. What are we going to do to make this product or service special? I love that. Henry, you've had a chance to look at this once, maybe a little bit now, a second time. What are your first impressions of the brief?
So first of all, I agree with you. I love having that quote at the top. I actually, in the brief template that I use now, I have a quote from Paul Feldwick about. So that's I guess kind of the idea of before you even get into the brief, what's the mood you want to set with the creatives that are going to receive this brief, and what's the mindset you want them to be in. And mine is also a little bit of inspiration about what creativity is, the artistry that we use to make brands famous. So I have that. So I love that as well. I was stunned. You've been talking about this brief for a long time. I don't think it was in the first draft of your book.
No.
Uh, so I really hadn't examined it. And I'm looking at it, and if it's her first brief, right, and it is, what it tells us is, and from the conversation you had with her that I edited, I could tell a very bright young woman, right? This is somebody who's intellectually working at a high level, which is important in a strategist. You want smart people and people that are perceptive. Your anecdote about her going to the mall to do some basic field work, to me, is something that we've harped about all the time, right? About get out there in the real world where consumers are buying or using the product. In this case, they weren't using the product, but it was kind of, she wanted to talk with them, um, and and she got out of that what essentially was an insight, even though this template doesn't have a box for insight. In fact, you could argue the single-minded proposition here, where it says the single most persuasive idea we can convey, is sort of an insight.
Mhm.
But I think, and I was kind of just in my mind thinking about what the insight, and the insight that she discovered while she was doing the research is that men have a double standard when it comes to their shoes, right? I think the idea was, and it's explained here in the what they currently think, that they know having shine shoes is important, like when you're really dressed up, but on a day to day, they're not. So it's kind of like they're lazy about it, so they have a double standard. So that's very insightful, and even though it's not on the brief, it is what informed the brief, her discovery that men kind of, they knew, but they were willing to let it slide. That how much the shoes made a difference. So obviously, the thing that jumps out at you immediately is the brevity of this brief.
Mhm.
There's not a extra wasted word, and there's not a single piece of jargon. There's no
No.
industry jargon. This is, I'm an everyday person talking to an everyday person about everyday people and their shoes, which is an everyday object, and that plainness of it makes the brilliance of it, I think, stand out even more, right? Like when you get things like, why are we advertising? You could talk about, and I've done it, create mental availability and blah, blah, blah. And we could, because we want to raise awareness, because to encourage men to think more about the state of their shoes and what that says about them. So it's not even, we're not even selling them here. We know, and I think that this does kind of go along with some of the marketing science that we know. Kiwi is synonymous with men's shoe polish,
Yeah, I
right?
mean,
And
can you even name another polish?
none. None. So Kiwi, as an industry leader here, this is category advertising,
Mhm.
right? This is,
Mhm.
she's saying, what do we want men to think more about the state of their shoes, because obviously they're going to buy shoe polish, and obviously they're going to buy our shoe polish. So there's implications that aren't necessarily explicit in the brief, and they don't have to be explicit in the brief,
Right.
right? Like if somebody challenged, if I were her and somebody challenged me, says it doesn't say Kiwi here, are we going to sell Kiwi? But we know marketing science tells us that category advertising always benefits the the leader of the category. So yeah, I think it's brilliant. Who are we talking to? Men who take pride in their look and feel their appearance is a direct reflection on themselves. So there's no age demographic here. There's not, I mean,
None.
why are we going to limit it to men 25 to 54? Like, why couldn't a 19-year-old call? We're targeting here an attitude, a belief, right? A way of life. And so we're saying there are men, and who knows? And I don't know in this case, a lot of times beneath that, there's a mountain of research, right?
That's
Like,
exactly what I say. That's exactly how I set this up. That mountain of research, it's almost as if the strategist, like you, Henry, doing your job, saying, I've got this pile of research on my desk. Creatives, if you want to go through it, knock yourself out. And what do I say as a creative? This is all I need.
yeah,
This is
hard,
brilliant.
hard pass.
This is a brilliant synopsis of all that pile. This is all I need.
And it doesn't have, again, the artificial limitations of it has to be a, so the only limitations here is that it's men, right? Because this is a men's shoe polish.
Well,
And
hang on a sec. What you could be talking to women. You could be the women
well,
who care about their guys, the mom who cares about the son, who knows the son cares about his shoes. It is, I think, a vast majority of the target is men, but I don't think
yeah,
you can exclude women from this.
you're right. But I think that that's the point, is one target, and we're going to create an ad that will appeal to those ancillary targets
Yes.
pretty much by default, right? Because
Right.
if it's important to the man and the mom wants to do something for the son, it's going to be important to her, right? So, that's another, by the way, pitfall we talk about is, you have to be choiceful in writing a creative brief. And here, in a way, she's choiceful, and in a way, she's not. She's choiceful because she's choosing this attitude, but she's not being choiceful in the sense of, I'm going to limit it to this age, and I'm going to limit it to millennials, or back then they wouldn't have been talking about millennials, or they would have said Gen Xers or whatever. Like, it's not about that. Like, you could be 88 or 16 if you share this attitude, which is what we care about. Well, we know what the research showed, and I'm making it up in my head. What the research showed is that some men don't give a crap about the way they look. Some men care a lot about the way they look. And so those are the ones that we think we can convince. They're persuadable, to use the parlance of our times.
Yeah.
They're persuadable voters, right? They're persuadable consumers. So
what I like to say when I use this brief to teach is walk away from the knee-jerk negative reactions that most marketers tend to have when they see this brief. They say, where are the KPIs? Where are the deliverables? Where's the budget? Where's all these, what's the marketing objective? All these other things that they expect to see on a brief, and look at the insight and the emotion and the inspirational qualities of this brief, because this is what creatives want and need the most. And think about how much time Sarah spent writing this brief. Not just one draft, but two drafts. She threw one out.
While you were talking, I was thinking, it's like, what is an art director going to do with your KPIs?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. As I like to say, when people ask me that, I say, look, I've worked in direct marketing and direct response for many years. I get it. KPIs are important, but I don't need to worry about a KPI until I've got an idea first.
So what I would do, if somebody, maybe you can steal this if you want, when next time somebody says, where are the KPIs, say, first of all, what's an art director going to do with some KPIs? Secondly, what do you think will happen to the brand's KPIs if we achieve what it says here? If we encourage men to think more about the state of their shoes, if we are successful in that KPI, right, of encouraging men to, what do you think that's going to do to the brand's numbers and KPI? Because at the end, this is what drives that. Right.
And the other thing that we always forget is that a branding campaign like this, and this was an outdoor campaign, a branding campaign like this is going to have a long-term, it's going to require a long-term commitment to doing these kinds of campaigns before it's going to have any direct impact. In other words, if you were to stop doing this campaign, let's say the campaign launched 2 years ago, and it's been out there for 2 years. If you stopped the campaign today, you're not going to see a drop in sales next week.
No.
You might not see a drop in sales for a couple of months because it doesn't happen that quickly.
And
Only
if it
when you
was
get,
on an upward trajectory,
yeah,
you might see it continue upward for a while. This is, brand advertising is like steering an aircraft carrier with a small rudder. Like the
yeah,
changes that you're making are gradual over many miles, right?
right,
But the point is, the absence of it is the absence of your brand in the consumer's mind.
right,
And so
exactly.
over time, that is going to be deleterious to the brand. But this is a low, like, how frequently do you buy shoe polish, right? And we need to also go back 20 years, right? Um, to a time when men were more likely to wear shoes that required polishing,
Yep.
right? As
Mhm.
opposed to today, I wear leather sandals everywhere.
Right.
And
We work from home, so we don't even have that requirement. No one ever sees our feet because we're on
exactly.
Zoom.
But in 2003, there was still a significant
Yeah.
segment of the population that needed to get dressed for work.
Yep.
You had to wear a shirt and tie. And so, but still, a can of shoe polish lasts a pretty long time. It's a
Mhm.
relatively low involvement category in which we're the. So, where are we going to get our growth? We're going to get our growth from new users that maybe are not new, but infrequent users, by driving their frequency and by alerting them to the fact that, like, hey, this is something you should be dedicating a little bit of time to, and obviously dedicating a little bit of our product to, because
Right.
the I think the barrier, right, to using the product is the time that it takes. It's a chore, like, you to properly shine a shoe and get it looking new and doing it well. It takes some time, and that's
It
really
does.
the drawback here. But I think the point here is that it's worth it, because
Yeah.
if you think you're looking good, and this is without me looking at the creative, I haven't edited
Which we'll
part
look at
2 yet.
we'll look at that in a minute. We saw it in the previous episode, but we'll look at it again.
Yeah. But it's worth it. This, shining your shoes is worth it. It's like that's the impression that I'm getting, right? Because of the single-minded proposition.
Mhm.
Though you might not be looking down, others are. Like, your shoes are something. I had my first boss in advertising was like a freak about, like, he thought of himself as like a personal guru to people, and he'd be like, "Hey, your shoes, man, you got to shine those shoes. Those shoes aren't saying anything good about." One time he had me. One time he had me go talk to an art director to tell him that he should clean up the mess in his car.
That's
This
not a
is a
guru.
car.
That's a busybody.
Yeah, a little bit. But yeah, that's what was that was. But so yeah, but I this brief, the interesting thing we mentioned doesn't have an insight there. It does have what we call a shift, right? Like, what do they
Yep.
currently think? What would we like them to think? All
Mhm.
of those things, you glean information, I would imagine, as a creative from them.
Yes.
And they all work together. There's no repetition here. There's no redundancy. As you said, the name Kiwi doesn't even come in until the evidence, right? The reasons to believe. So a great job on her first time out. I could see why TRG has kept her around all these years, and why
Yeah.
she's a group strategy head with them. TRG, by the way, legendary agency,
Yep.
that's fallen on some hard times recently, but doesn't take away from all of the great stuff that they've done in the past.
Yeah, exactly. So I think the lesson here for brief writers is a number of things here, and you can add on if for something that if I've forgotten, Henry. One is, as you've said, it is incredibly brief. It is not repetitive. It's inspirational. It's packed with insights without ever actually asking the question, what is the insight? And then the behind the scenes stuff, where we learn from Sarah in our conversation with her, the amount of work that she did, the amount of writing and rewriting, the courage that it took for her to throw a draft out and start over, and then the field work, just going out on her own to say, I want to see what's going on in the world. What are these guys saying about shoes, polishing their shoes, how they reflect on themselves. She put in an awful lot of work, again, for a product that's about that big, that you don't buy every week. You might even buy one maybe just once a year, depending upon how often you polish your shoes. So for a little, well, we call them widgets. Our job in advertising is to sell widgets. This is a small consumer packaged good.
The
And
size and shape of a hockey puck.
exactly. And look at what she put into this and the rewards. Oh my goodness. Why don't we take it? You're going to have to edit this
So,
because I'm going to
so
get the work out. You want to take a look at the work?
yeah. So one thing I do want to add though is, I think in a modern brief, what I would add here to the brief, the only things that I would add would be on the I would have the, and this isn't a reflection on her as a brief writer, it's a reflection on the time. There wasn't as much emphasis on tone back then
Mhm.
as there is now. She says fun and reverent, which is fine, but I think a good brand today will have like that tone more specified. And the other thing is the distinctive brand assets. Like, I would want to have those in there. And again, those are concepts that came after this, years after this brief was written. But distinctive brand assets for Kiwi would be important, right? Like, it has the metal tin that it comes in, the little flip of the thing, the logo, the smell, the distinctive smell of the product. It has, is
Yep.
a distinctive asset. So I think that those things help creatives too. And in a 2023 brief for the same product could be in this brief as short additions.
Yeah. Let's take a look at just one piece of work that came from this. Probably, I think, one of my favorites. Unpolished shoes are the open fly of footwear.
Did
And
did you guys talk about the tagline "Look sharp"? Was
yeah,
that something that pre-existed or was created with the ads?
we did not talk about that, so I don't know. But my guess is it's new.
Yeah, it goes with the whole brief, and
Mm-hmm.
and even that is economical, right? Look sharp.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Now that we talk about the fact that there's no such thing as a perfect brief, and you could pick a couple of nits. I think the word help is one of those marketing words. It was in the reasons to believe. Kiwi will help you da 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 da. But when you get down to that level of picking nits, that reveals how good the brief is.
Yeah, I
So
mean, I didn't even notice it.
yeah, well,
I think you're right, but I didn't even notice it. So,
well, I've been reviewing this brief for many years, so I've looked at it pretty carefully. And if that's, like I said, if that's the thing that I complain about, oh my goodness, we've got so much to learn. I also think we hear a lot about how creatives complain not getting good briefs, and it is a rare thing to get a really good brief. I think the Hulu brief that you did for our episode last year, this brief that Sarah Walker Hall wrote for Kiwi, are proof positive that if you put your mind to it and if you think hard and you dedicate yourself to it, these briefs are possible. I just wish more brief writers out there would dedicate themselves to doing this kind of a brief. And these are great examples that we can learn from.
yep. I wonder, and I'm sorry that I missed the conversation with her. I wonder because she did work in account management before she went to planning, and I wonder how many briefs she was exposed to, and if the Richards Group had a culture of good brief writers, and maybe that rubbed off on her a little bit, that her first time out, she was able to produce something. So, because I mean, if she had already been exposed to a few briefs and they were that good, then she knew what the bar was, right? Like, that's the bar. And I think that, frankly, the problem for a lot of bad brief writers is that they don't know what the bar is.
Yes, exactly. Well, her boss is Christopher Owens, who's still there. I'm going to see if we can finagle him to come on our show because he hired her. He roped her in, shall we say, from brand management, and had high hopes for her. Saw something in her that I think has obviously played out very well. So I'd like to get him to come on our show and talk about that. So I think there is a culture of good brief writing over there, and we'd like to tap into
Oh, I'm
that.
sure there is, but I didn't want to just, because like you said, it's her first time out and she writes this great brief. But if you're in that culture and you're exposed to that, that's different. And if you're,
Mhm.
a lone self-taught strategist like I was for many years, right? I don't know what the bar is for a good brief. That's why I started looking for resources like books, and I find this book by some schmuck named Howard Eibach.
Well, you had good taste in books, Henry. Good stuff, Henry.
Good stuff, Howard.
He's Henry Gomez.
And he's Howard Eibach, and together we're the Brief Brothers. Till next time.
Bye-bye.